Go to now, ye rich men, weep and howl for your miseries that shall come upon you. Your riches are corrupted, and your garments are moth-eaten. Your gold and silver is cankered, and the rust of them shall be a witness against you, and shall eat your flesh as it were fire. Ye have heaped treasure together for the last days. Behold, the hire of the laborers who have reaped down your fields, which is of you kept back by fraud, crieth. And the cries of them which have reaped are entered into the ears of the Lord of Sabaoth. Ye have lived in pleasure on the earth, and been wanton. Ye have nourished your hearts as in a day of slaughter. Ye have condemned and killed the just, and he doth not resist you. Be patient therefore, brethren, unto the coming of the Lord. Behold, the husbandman waiteth for the precious fruit of the earth, and hath long patience for it, until he receive the early and latter rain. Be ye also patient, establish your hearts, for the coming of the Lord draweth nigh. Grudge not one against another, brethren, lest ye be condemned. Behold, the judge standeth before the door. Take my brethren the prophets, who have spoken in the name of the Lord, for an example of suffering, affliction, and of patience. Behold, we count them happy which endure. Ye have heard of the patience of Job, and have seen the end of the Lord, that the Lord is very pitiful and of tender mercy. But above all things, my brethren, swear not, neither by heaven, neither by the earth, neither by any other oath. But let your yea be yea, and your nay, nay, lest ye fall into condemnation. Is any among you afflicted? Let him pray. Is any merry? Let him sing psalms. Is any sick among you? Let him call for the elders of the church, and let them pray over him, anointing him with oil in the name of the Lord. And the prayer of faith shall save the sick, and the Lord shall raise him up. And if he have committed sins, they shall be forgiven him. Confess your faults one to another, and pray one for another, that ye may be healed. The effectual fervent prayer of a righteous man availeth much. Elijah was a man subject to like passions as we are, and he prayed earnestly that it might not rain, and it rained not on the earth by the space of 3 years and 6 months. And he prayed again, and the heaven gave rain, and the earth brought forth her fruit. Brethren, if any of you do err from the truth, and one convert him, let him know that he which converteth the sinner from the error of his way shall save a soul from death, and shall hide a multitude of sins.
Hello, YouTube. Hello, everybody. Today is Thursday, May 23rd, 2019, and I am gathered here with Jörg Glismann in Belgium for another very interesting reading of this book called The Divine Program of the World's History. And in our last session we were talking on page 94, 95 in the book, and we're dealing with this history that is very controversial, shall we say, Jörg?
Yeah, we are dealing with assassinations of the Jesuits during the reign of Queen Elizabeth I in the 16th century. She reigned in Great Britain, in Protestant Great Britain, that she took over from Bloody Mary, who tried to make Britain again Catholic. Queen Elizabeth took over from 1558 to 1603, so she was really long-term running that country. And we were reading about Mr. Walsingham, who started an intelligence service that kept her alive all these days, because she was excommunicated by the Pope, who by that made her free as a bird to kill for everybody, because it is always allowed to kill a heretic who has been excommunicated. It even is a meritorious work to do so. And, we have in Germany, we have a saying for that. It's called vogelfrei. Someone is as free as a bird, but that means also that you can kill him whenever you want to.
Mm-hmm.
And we were speaking about the Babington plot. That's something many people don't even understand. And these Babington plots then leading up to the sending of the Spanish Armada in 1588, where the Jesuits tried to overthrow the Protestant government of England in 1588. They planned to send the Armada over the Channel, over the ocean from Spain to England, to infiltrate England, but not only to land on the shores of England, but to make sure that at the same time they have had people undercover in all positions in London, the capital city, to overthrow the government at that time. Everything was set. People were placed. Everything was set. But then, they didn't count on divine intervention. And that's what we're going to read about today, I think. So that's where we left off last time.
Wow, Jörg, this is what I really love about this book. It just gives us the point blank history quick, and we can go from one to the next to the next to the next, and we can learn how the succession works. That's what I really appreciate about this book, because you're speaking about people that don't know about the Babington plot. Well, hey, that includes me, because I don't know much about it. But we can learn more, and we can hone in on any specific point of this history that we wish to study more. It's the whole purpose of doing the study. So, Jörg, I'm all ears.
Okay. So then I'm going to retreat to the last paragraph on page 95 of the book, page 91 in the PDF, as you see, where we read the Roman Catholic quote-unquote Truth Society and Catholic Book Notes, October 1913, and again Father Graham, a recent pervert from the Church of Scotland in the Catholic Times in November 1913, made desperate attempts to falsify the history concerning this great event in our national history. So speaking about the Babington plot and the Spanish Armada. Yeah. The following extract from his article is a fair specimen of the perverting influence exercised by Rome over the minds of those who fall into her snare. It looked like a sea snark, but I don't know that word. It does
almost,
it's
yes.
Snare, yeah. On the minds of those who fall into her snare. Yeah, you have to excuse me here and there if I don't pronounce a word correctly. English still is not my native language. I try my very best, but I most of the time don't have the time to read this book in advance, and by that make myself, how do you say that, knowledgeable to all.
I think most of our listeners understand quite clearly that there are going to be little snags in the pronunciations, but I wouldn't make a big deal out of it. If there is a big deal, that's why I'm here. I will try and stop and correct it.
That's why I sometimes ask, is this the way you pronounce this word, or that the way you pronounce this word? Because
I don't like to interrupt you when you're in a flow, most of the time. I just let you go with it, because it's just like when I'm working in the trade and someone's working on a measurement or something. Oftentimes it's just best to have silence when you're working, because then you can retain all those different numbers that you might have in your head, or the task that's in your head, because breaking concentration can really be a downer when you're in these kinds of studies. So
yeah, and I really have to concentrate on these books, because when I don't read them in advance, of course, and it is not my native language and I don't know what's in there, it is not only reading and understanding the words, but it's also understanding the context that they are in,
It is.
And,
it is.
And in the same way, relying on the help of the Holy Spirit, who leads into all truth, who leads me into a deeper understanding, so that I can discuss what I'm reading with you at the same moment as I read it for the very first time, with you and, of course, with the listeners and the viewers. So I just hope that they are understanding that here and there I have just a glitch in the language, but that's the that's the way it is when you speak multiple languages, and you are never,
and understandably so. You're
and,
no
and
big
you are
deal.
and listen, the biggest point is, and you are not educated to speak those languages, because I'm self-learned,
Right.
my
right.
Dutch, for example, let's just go there for a few minutes that people understand that. When I came over here to Belgium, I had a course in English before, and I had a course in French before. And when I got to know my wife, and she is Flemish, she spoke Dutch. She doesn't. She's still alive, but not my wife anymore. She doesn't speak French. She speaks Dutch, and she speaks English. And the first time when we met, we only spoke English together, starting a relationship with a language that was not her native language, not my native language. And listen. Then I went to study over here in Belgium. I went to an institution of higher learning, second to the university, but I didn't speak Dutch. I only spoke the few words that I learned when I was with my wife visiting her parents in the weekend, And then all of a sudden I went to that school, and I sat there in the schoolroom and in the classroom, and all the other pupils were 10 years or so younger than me, because I came from the military. I already was 28. Most of them were just 18, going from normal high school to this higher education. And I sat there, and the teacher spoke Dutch, wrote Dutch on the blackboard. So I had to hear and listen and understand. I had to read and I had to write. But it is like being thrown into the water, You just got to learn to swim. But this is the way that I learned my Dutch. I never had a course in Dutch or something. I was never trained in that language. It's self-learned, more or less. And with English, it's more or less the same. Even though I had a few years of English in school, I was never very good at. Even though I had this course then, but my English started to flourish a little bit better when I spoke English with my wife at that time.
Oh, I bet.
And
absolutely right.
But then after a while, we spoke German and we spoke Dutch. So we spoke 3 languages, actually, in our marriage. And when the marriage was done, I lived on my own here, and I was only speaking Dutch. And then in 2012, my mother came to live with me, before, the circumstances.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Since then, of course, I speak a lot of German here in home anymore. So I finally rediscover my native language. I speak Dutch with my clients and everything outside of the apartment here. And I just have English actually over Skype with you guys by reading and doing all that. And this is how I learned this language.
Yeah, that's right. That's
great. This is how I learned this language. So maybe when people know this, they can understand why I have here and there a lack of capacity, a lack of vocabulary, and a lack of understanding of the language. But for the most part, it is, how do they say that? Self-learned,
Sure.
with watching.
Oh, yeah.
With watching all these videos on 9/11 that I started on the end of 2010. That's how I got into English,
It's very similar to being a musician, because in musician, you're not really learning a language. You're learning different notes and how to harmonize with different, there's a lot to learn in the realm of music. It's a different realm, of course, but it's a lot like communication in the sense that if you hit the wrong note, it doesn't sound too good. People don't like it.
I think what is more or less really comparable about that is that you have to have a kind of a talent for it.
Yes,
if you don't have any talent for music, you will never play an instrument correctly or make the connections and see.
Can be said for language,
and the same is being said with language.
Communication and listening, having the ability to listen and to want to be able to make things work. To want to be able to make a connection with someone across the Atlantic, like we're doing. And it's you have to be able to be patient and to be willing to make mistakes. And I'm sure this is how it works. This is why Jörg and I are able to maintain a good friendship is because we're willing to make mistakes. We're not always perfect.
No, we're not. And sometimes, I have this, like when I try to speak French. I'm not very good in French, But
Ooh,
when
and I
when
heard about that, Jörg. In French, they have all these different...
in French, in the language,
different dialects.
In France, that's quite okay. And in Dutch, that's even worse.
But it's very complicated in France, I hear, because of the different, what do you say?
The pronunciation of the words?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know. I lived for a time
rules,
when I was rules, grammatical rules. That's something else. The French have a lot of grammatical rules, but they have more exceptions to the rules than follow the rules.
That's what I was trying to say. Thank you.
But different dialects, no, that's not so bad. The problem is that the French speak very fast, and because they speak so fast, they combine these words. Sometimes they speak three words, but it sounds like one, and that is very confusing when you're not used to it. And when I was living for a fortnight or something, when I was on a holiday there in the south of France, on the border of Spain in Catalonia, Catalonic France it is called. You have the Catalans in Spain. Yeah, that is the region around Barcelona. Like you have in the north, you have the Basques, the place where Inigo de Loyola came from. But in the south, you have the Catalanic area, and the Catalanic area does spread as well in France as in Spain. And there in France, they speak Catalonian. So that is a language that is in basic, it is French, but it has a completely different pronunciation, and to me it seemed even easier to understand that, but you have to concentrate, very, very much concentrate on that. It is not like when you compare a Texan to a New Yorker. Of course, you can always hear when someone comes from Texas, But he is very well audible. And that is something that you don't have in many other languages. And the problem in France is, or in French, in the language is that they very often speak a word and that are actually two or three words, because in France it is normally to bind words together. For example, when I want to say the hotel, in France it is le, that is the article, the, and hotel, but the French do not pronunciate the H when it is in the beginning of a word. So hotel becomes hotel, and because the le hotel doesn't work, so they put L apostrophe and then hotel, and they speak l'hotel. So this is only one example. I heard a sentence for example, let's go to the cinema. Easy in English, right? Let's go to the cinema.
Yep.
Now, okay, what do you make of allo cinema? Yeah, that's the same in French. Aller au cinéma. Aller means go, let's go. Yeah, that is the demanding form. Aller, A-L-L-E-Z behind, because that's the commanding form. Au cinéma. Au is two words. A, le. A means to, le, the. Okay, but you don't say aller. You don't say aller à le cinéma. You say aller au cinéma. Aller becomes o, A-U. And cinema is cinema. Okay? So it is aller au cinéma, and they speak that sometimes so fast it's allo cinema, like hello cinema.
Right.
Right. And when you are not used to that, you don't get it, you don't understand it, and that's very difficult. But the only thing I wanted to say is when I speak with French people and they laugh about my French response, then I say, okay, let's speak English, let's speak German, let's speak Dutch. How good are you at that? Huh? At least I try to speak your language. Huh?
Right. Exactly right. Yes, and I just can't imagine being in those shoes. That's a European thing, and I just haven't been to Europe enough to really know how to wear those shoes, how to try to speak other languages. It's just something that's not happening in Minnesota.
No, you can go 500 miles either north or south or east or west, and you will still be in a realm that speaks the same language, right?
Well, ironically, where my mother grew up, they actually would speak Norwegian in the streets.
Oh, yeah.
Because there are a lot of people from Norway in that area. And of course, my mother's half Norwegian, half, or I don't know if it's half or third or whatever. I'm just a huge hodgepodge of European descent. But, we're all blood, aren't we? I mean, that's what the Bible says. So
we are all one blood even.
We are one blood, and we might come from European nations. We might come from South American nations. However it is, we are all one blood. And, God did not joke around when he made us, So it's very clear. It's just man that likes to screw it up.
That's right. So
we just love to screw it up.
Let's go to the book. We have had a long introduction now, so...
Yeah, no problem.
Let me repeat this last sentence because this is important, because after this, of course, comes a quote. A quote from the quote-unquote Roman Truth Society and Catholic Book Notes, October 1913, and again, Father Graham, a recent pervert from the Church of Scotland, in the Catholic Times, November 1913, they both made desperate attempts to falsify the history concerning this Babington and Spanish Armada great event in our, speak of the English, national history. The following extract from his article is a fair specimen of the perverting influence exercised by Rome over the minds of those who fall into her snare. So, this is the article. The Spanish Armada, myth of a religious war. Yeah, already the word myth used with the Spanish Armada here is a denial of historical proven facts.
Yeah, good point.
By Father Graham, M.A., Motherwell, Catholic Times, November 28, 1913. Here's what he wrote. I suppose most of us who have reared in Protestantism were taught to believe that the Armada was a religious undertaking with the object of smashing Elizabeth and of making England Catholic again. And, implicitly or explicitly, we thanked God that the kingdom had been saved from the horrors of popery and the Inquisition. Froude and Kingsley and writers of that kind have helped to keep alive this idea. Unquote. Fancy a man who has been educated by the Church of Scotland, a Protestant Presbyterian church, remind you, writing such an article as the foregoing. It demonstrates how the Church of Rome can paralyze the conscience of an educated man and make him believe that a lie is truth and the truth a lie. How often, Bret, doesn't that happen in our life? That you are so sure of what you are saying, that you are so sure that I am talking the truth here, and everybody goes against you and makes you doubt.
Yeah, there's a lot of that. I can testify to that, all right. I've done it myself in the past so many times I can't even name one right now because there's too many.
Brother, that is why it is so important, so of utmost importance that we read and understand this book, the Holy Bible.
Agreed.
Because only in the Holy Bible, only in the true preserved Word of God, whether for an English native speaker, the King James Bible, or any other Bible in your own language that is translated on the same texts as the King James Version, so whether in German, in French, or Italian, or Spanish, you have all in those languages Bibles that are based on the same texts. Only when you have this true preserved Word of God and you study it and you understand it, you can be sure that what you say is the truth. Because if you do not have the Bible, if you do not have Jesus Christ to stand on, you are building on a foundation that is not very sure. You have to build on the rock and not on a pebble. That is what the Roman Catholic Church did. They actually built on a pebble. They built on the Petra, not on the Petros. Or what is it? They built on the Petros, not the Petra. The Petra is the rock. The is the rock, the foundation, and the Petros is the stone. They build on the stone. Matthew chapter 16, verse 18. I'm just reading on that little subject in the book from James Edgar Wiley of the Antichrist. I told you I'm reading in German. And he is absolutely destroying the arguments of the Roman Catholic Church that Peter is the foundation of the Roman Catholic Church, as they say, because of Matthew chapter 16, verse 18. Mm-hmm. He takes pages and pages and pages to go on about that, and I just love that work. I couldn't stop reading last night for 15 pages in these old German writing. It's hard to read, but it's a wonderful, wonderful book. And therefore, you know that when you build your foundation on a stone, well, a stone you can take from here to there. You can replace it. But when you build on the rock, that is Jesus Christ, you cannot replace a rock that easily. You cannot do it in comparison to a stone anyway. And that's the big difference. And therefore, we have to build everything that we say on the foundation of the Word of God. And only then can we be sure when we speak with His authority, and not assumed authority, but imputed authority, then we can be sure to speak the truth, and nobody can take that surety away from us. Any comment there, brother?
Yeah, I was just thinking a while back when we were doing some reading one time, Jörg, I can't remember if it was a year ago or how long ago it was, where I think I had jumped into the middle of some book, and you made a very profound comment, and you said, well, why don't you start at the beginning? And, every time I approach a new book now, and I want to jump in, I think of that. You start at the beginning, because then things find their proper place. And it makes sense, because if you just jump into the middle of the book, it's quite confusing, actually, because you don't understand the rhythm of the method at which the author is trying to explain the topic.
That's right.
So that's a very large overview, in a nutshell, that, when we're studying something, especially with history, it's really, really important to understand how the author is trying to frame what he's going to say. And that's the best way I can put it right now, is that when you're reading a work, it's always best to start at the beginning instead of jumping in chapters. Well, of course, you can always do that, but if you really want to get the full impact of the work, then you need to start at the beginning.
It's like with the Bible, when you open the Bible at about the middle, you are somewhere in the book of Psalms.
Yes.
That's a wonderful book, and it will probably edify you, and you will understand a lot. But you will understand much more when you start at Genesis.
Oh, yeah. Well, say the old, what we call the Old Testaments, and what we've learned in our study with Tom is that it's the law and the prophets, is much more foundational than anything else, because it's talking of the coming of our Messiah. It's not, it's much more foundational than the New Testament. But to someone that's new in the faith, Jörg, I think they really need very powerful influences to keep them. So it's difficult, this whole process of approaching the Bible, I must say, is very difficult. It takes a long time.
It is. It is a little bit about the exegesis,
Yes.
And the exegesis is very important because Martin Luther made that point very, very good in his own translation of the Bible. And without understanding the Old Testament, or the Law and the Prophets, it is very difficult to have a correct understanding of the New Testament. And without the understanding of the New Testament, it also is hard to make sense of the Old Testament. I mean, the other way around,
They work together.
Yeah, you cannot separate the one from the other. And that's why
right.
I'm always
that's the gospel.
That's why I'm always astonished at so many people who are out there on YouTube making comments. Oh, the God of the Old Testament is not the same as the God of the New Testament. Where do you come to that idea? This is so strange, but this is
that's what I would call theology right there.
Well, that's exactly what the Roman Catholic Church does, of course. Divide and conquer,
Yeah.
Divide the old books from the new books, put them apart, put something even that they invented in the middle, which is the church tradition, and then you don't know anywhere where you stand anymore, And therefore it is so...
lest any man spoil you through philosophy
and vain deceit. Yeah.
Through the traditions of men and not after Christ, more or less.
Exactly. Yeah, very good point, Bret. You bring up there. Very good point. But that's it, the Roman Catholic Church, in their teaching, they split the New and the Old Testament, and in between they put their traditions. And in the end, nobody knows anymore what's it all about. They are confused.
Yeah, we really, really, really need to discern what kind of principle a philosophy is, and applying a philosophy to Christ does not work.
No, because philosophy is a human study, a mankind study, and we need to study God when we study the Bible. We are not there to study ourselves, but we are there to study Him.
It's just like what we were saying just minutes ago, when we were talking about how many times have we made this mistake of, what was it, the sentence, a fancy man who has been educated by the Church of Scotland writing such an article as a foregoing. It demonstrates how the Church of Rome can paralyze the conscience of an educated man and make him believe that a lie is the truth, and the truth is a lie. This is exactly how church and state has deceived the whole world. We're drunken. The nations are drunk.
With the wine of the fornication.
Oof.
Exactly.
I mean, this rhetoric that's going around, and it's so contagious.
Yeah.
I think it's, you share that kind of disgust with me.
Oh,
that,
no.
You go into the world and all of a sudden the political football gets thrown right around, and then they expect you're going to take it and start running with it, Boy, oh boy. Just kind of have to shake my head once in a while, But, that's the world for you.
That's the world for you.
Sure is.
Let's go back to the book. Fancy a man who has been educated by the Church of Scotland, writing such an article as the foregoing. It demonstrates how the Church of Rome can paralyze the conscience of an educated man and make him believe that a lie is truth and the truth a lie. Father Graham then goes on to say that the Spanish and British documents recently brought to light disprove the accepted history of that great event. He, however, does not produce a single quotation from a single English or Spanish state document in support of his Roman Catholic version of the history of that great expedition. His whole article is comprised of nothing but assertions after the style of the Jesuits. In fact, it is the author's firm belief that the Jesuits are simply compelling Father Graham to write his article. Father Graham versus the Brompton Oratory Fathers? The testimony of the records of the English Catholics published in London in 1882 by the fathers of the Brompton Oratory, a great Roman Catholic institution in London. Well, I would say big, not great, because nothing Roman Catholic ever is great. Yeah? Proves the fact of Jesuitical falsities and establishes upon undeniable evidence that the objects sought by the projected invasion were, first, the dethronement of Queen Elizabeth and the overthrow of the Protestant dynasty and constitution. Secondly, the subjection of Britain to papal rule under the dominion of Spain with a subordinate Roman Catholic monarchy responsible to the Pope. And thirdly, the re-establishment in Britain of the Roman Catholic religion, the suppression of the Protestant religion, and the enforcement of the penalties of the Roman Catholic canon law against all persons who should obstinately refuse to be reconciled to the Roman Catholic faith. To be reconciled to the Roman Catholic faith, what does that mean? That you are invited to take full communion with the Church of Satan, and if you don't, they will apply convert or die. These records of the English Catholics consist of a series of letters and memorials of William, Cardinal Allen, from 1532 through 1594 AD, and the work contains letters, memoranda, dispatches, reports and other official documents which passed between the courts of Rome, Spain, France, etc. In these we have clear details of the correspondence carried on with Mary, Queen of Scots, with the Duke of Parma, and with the several English and Scottish conspirators, all of whom were engaged in promoting the intended invasion of England and inciting rebellion therein. In the plots for the assassination of Elizabeth, and in securing the re-establishment in this country of the supreme authority and jurisdiction of the Roman Pontiff. It will be seen that the fathers of the Brompton Oratory prove from the following translations of Spanish state papers, documents, and so on, that Antichrist Pope Sixtus V actually sent the Armada against England, that the Catholic quote-unquote Truth Society, quote-unquote Father Graham, and the Jesuits have deliberately attempted to falsify history by asserting that the same state papers prove the very opposite. It is a very simple matter to know which party is telling the truth. The Oratorian Fathers reprint the actual documents. The Catholic quote-unquote Truth Society, the Jesuits, and quote-unquote Father Graham do not. Most of the Catholic quote-unquote Truth Society's literature is written by Jesuits, who simply set all sorts of falsifications of history afloat without quoting authorities in the idle hope, that some of it will lodge in the minds of the masses. In the preface of these records it is stated that the sources from which the documents set forth therein have been obtained are, quote, the archives of the Roman Catholic See of Westminster, the state papers and the Roman transcripts in the Public Record Office, London, the Spanish archives in Simancas, Spain, the British Museum, the archives of the Kingdom of Belgium at Brussels, the archives of the English Roman Catholic College at Rome, the archives of Stonyhurst College, which is a Jesuitical college, and the manuscripts collection belonging to the Old Brotherhood of the English Clergy, formerly known as the English Chapter. It would be difficult to name a more authoritative list of authentic documents. These documents are reprinted in these records from the originals in the English, Latin, Spanish, Italian, or French languages, as they were written. But many of those in Italian and almost all the Spanish ones have been translated into English, and incorporated into the historical introduction by quote-unquote Father Francis Knox, D.D., priest of the Congregation of the Oratorians, prefixed to the work. Numerous authorities are cited in this work on page 29 to prove the zeal shown by Antichrist Pope Gregory XIII for securing the deposition of Elizabeth. And it is stated that, quote, he left nothing undone to impel Philip II of Spain to overthrow Elizabeth by force of arms, unquote. Quote-unquote fathers Parson and Campion, of both who are Jesuits, were sent to England to incite the English Roman Catholics to rise against Elizabeth and to aid the invaders in their enterprise. Quote-unquote Father Creighton was sent to Scotland to establish communications with the Scottish conspirators. Dr. Nicholas Sander was, quote, sent as apostolic nuncio to Ireland in order to encourage and unite the Irish nobles who were in arms against Elizabeth, unquote. A nuncio is the highest representative of the Holy See in a country. Parsons entered actively into the conspiracy and reported favorably as to the excellent disposition of the English Roman Catholics towards the enterprise. Information which, quote, he had learned from what many of them had declared when he had treated with them of their consciences, unquote. For this abuse of the secrecy of the confessional, the following authority is cited in pages 33 and 39. F. Parsons expressly stated this to J.B. Tessis, the Spanish agent in France, who mentioned it in a letter to Philip II on Paris the 18th of May, 1582. Full details are given of the plot to assassinate Elizabeth, for the authenticity of which the dispatches are printed, which had been sent by the nuncio at Paris to the Cardinal of Como. The sums of money to be paid by the King of Spain and the Antichrist are duly set down. And it is further stated in this introduction that, quote, the Archbishop of Glasgow, the nuncio to the French court, himself a bishop, the Cardinal of Como, Philip II of Spain, and perhaps the Pope himself, when they were made aware of the project, did not express the slightest disapprobation of it, but spoke only of the manifest advantage it would be to religion if in some way or other the wicked women were removed by death, unquote. In a little footnote we read here, that is about the Pope himself, so about the expectation that maybe the Pope himself was involved, as we read here. We go into a little footnote that says, any person reading the dispatches can have no doubt upon the subject, but conclusive evidence is afforded by the letter found on the Roman Catholic priest, quote-unquote, Father Perry, who was executed for a design to murder the Queen. This letter was from Cardinal Como, encouraging him to proceed in his intention and informing him that it had the entire approbation of the Pope, who granted him plenary indulgence and remission of all his sins, according to his request. So, when he goes on with his plan to murder the Queen, all his sins will be forgiven by the one who claims to forgive sins here on earth, but of course not by the one who really is the only one who can forgive sins, which is our Father in heaven. This conspiracy, the author continues, to murder Elizabeth is justified in this work of the Oratorian quote-unquote fathers by an argument constructed on the ground that it was no more a sin to kill Elizabeth than it would be for a prisoner to kill a robber or bandit, or in order to secure his escape out of the hands of such robber or bandit. As I say, within the Roman Catholic Church it is a meritorious work to kill a heretic, and since the Queen was excommunicated, she was officially pronounced a heretic, and everybody was free to kill her without committing a sin. A plenary indulgence and remission of all the sins when you kill the Queen of England. Now the Pope incites Philip II of Spain to invade England. The Spanish ambassador's report, February 24th, 1586. Let me just take a sip of my tea here for a second.
Please do. Yeah, I was just going to look something up while you're talking there.
Mm-hmm. And what were you looking up?
Meritorious, because I think it always helps to go to the 1828 online dictionary and check that out. Meritorious is an adjective deserving of reward or notice, regard, fame, or happiness, or that of, or of that which shall be a suitable return for services or excellence of any kind. We applaud the meritorious services of the laborer, the soldier, and the seaman. We admire the meritorious labors of Watts. This is Old English here. Doddridge and Carey and Martin. We rely for salvation on the meritorious obedience and sufferings of Christ.
You know where I know the word meritorious from, brother?
Go ahead.
It's because Tom Friess used the word when he was explaining this situation. When he said, like it is written in the Bible, when Jesus Christ said, there comes a day when they throw you out of the synagogues and they will kill you and even think they do God's work.
Yes.
In that regard, right. Tom used the word meritorious. I never knew that word before, but I heard saying that word. I don't even know how to translate it into German or whatever. It's to get a merit, but I don't know what it is to translate that word. But I understand that word. That's the wonderful thing about language. No, it's about going back to what we talked about earlier, about the understanding of language. I hear Tom say that word in a context, and immediately I understand the word without even knowing in German or in Dutch what is that word. I couldn't even translate it, but I understand it in English full-heartedly. Yeah, and it's from merit. It has nothing to do with maritime because it is MERRIT.
Ah, yes, merit. Yes,
it's
right.
From merit.
Thank you.
So I'm teaching you a little English.
I don't know.
Here.
I always think of military, Jörg. I think of military. First thing when I hear maritime or meritorious, but it is merit.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. I'm teaching you a little bit English here today.
Yeah, I need help too, The old iron needs some sharpening around here.
Oh, come on.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Let's continue. I'm just in such a good flow in the reading here.
I just thought of this too. I looked up barbarous the other day just because I was, doing some other, I was really, really interested to see that perhaps that word barbarous came from people butchering the Greek language in Greece, way back in the Grecian Empire, and I just thought of you, Jörg, immediately. You were like, these butchers are ruining our language.
Yeah.
It's true. It's true, but when you come to America, you find out that everyone's a butcher. Because no one knows the true origin of it all, That's what's so horrible about America. It's like we've been cut off from our heritage in a sense, but we really haven't. It's just a matter of, the family being accountable for it, I guess. But anyway, we're way off tangents here. Let's get back to the book.
Good. Let's go back. So the Pope incites Philip II of Spain to invade England, and the Spanish ambassador's report of February 24th, 1586. So this is about 2 years before the Spanish Armada was to hit England. Further details, the author says, are given of the correspondence carried on with Mary, Queen of Scots, and of the progress of the conspiracies for the invasion of England and dethronement of Elizabeth, which were formed with the approval of Antichrist Gregory XIII during the lifetime of that Pope. Upon his death, his successor, Pope Sixtus V, took up the matter with increased vigor. The dispatches published by the Oratorians furnish overwhelming evidence showing the efforts made by this Pope to incite Philip II of Spain to undertake the invasion of England, but it will be sufficient to quote the dispatch of Count Olivares, the Spanish ambassador to the Holy See, bearing date on the 24th of February 1586. And in the footnote we read, "This is copied from a transcript of the dispatch in the archives of Simancas in Spain, and the editor of the records states that, quote, for this and other valuable documents from the archives of Simancas, he is indebted to the kindness of Don Pascual de Guayangos, at whose request Don F. de Paulo Diaz, director of the archives, was so good as to cause the search to be made in the archivum of letters and other documents relating to Cardinal Allen, and to send him copies of such as could be found there." Unquote. Where did we just take off with the footnote? There. In this dispatch, sent by Olivares to Philip II of Spain, was enclosed a, quote, summary of the several points submitted by the Spanish ambassador for the consideration to the Pope, as well as a report of the reply made by the Pope to each point. Unquote. Now, Philip II's first point. The first point submitted to the Pope was, quote, although His Majesty Philip II has been at different times admonished by the predecessors of His Holiness to undertake this enterprise, he never felt so convinced of the reality of the assistance he should obtain from them as he now confidently expects it from the courage and vigor of His Holiness. Which consideration, together with the great favor with which His Holiness so reasonably regards the enterprise and the desire which His Majesty has to give him satisfaction, moves him to engage in it. Unquote. Now you can see that here politicians are talking, right? Because a normal man doesn't understand a word. The Pope's reply upon this point, the Spanish ambassador reports the Pope's remarks as follows, quote, His Holiness returns infinite thanks to God that the Pope has been the instrument of setting in motion His Majesty, to whom he gives many blessings for the zeal with which he is disposed to engage in an undertaking so worthy of the calling of the Catholic King. Unquote. Now, Philip's second point submitted was that the end and declared ground of the enterprise shall be to bring back that kingdom to the obedience of the Roman Catholic Church, and to put in possession of it the Queen of Scotland, who so well deserves it for having remained firm in the faith in the midst of such great calamities. Now, this is the very first sentence that I read that is very clear about the subject. Right, Bret?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Because before, this was blah, blah, blah. Here, this was just political blah, 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 they said here.
Yeah.
But here,
sure,
he really comes to the point. Now, the Pope's reply. His Holiness praises and agrees to what His Majesty here proposes. This also is clear. Philip's third point was submitted in reference to the succession to the throne of England after the death of the Queen of Scotland. The object sought by Philip was to have James set aside as being a confirmed heretic and to secure the succession in Philip's family. The Pope's reply to this point, the Pope gave a doubtful answer, saying that, quote, this was a matter for grave consideration. unquote. The fourth point submitted by Philip to the Pope was, quote, His Majesty finds himself so much drained by the long wars of Flanders, Netherlands, the Duke of Alba, the killing within a few years of 18,000 Protestant souls in Flanders, and his subjects of every state so distressed that, much as he regrets it, for he would have rejoiced to be able to carry out this enterprise without asking anything of His Holiness, its magnitude, and the preparations which are necessary to resist those who in great numbers will endeavor to hinder it, make it requisite that His Holiness should contribute for his share 2 millions of gold, unquote. Now the Pope replies in a demand that was, quote, His Holiness, while he thinks that every assistance given to his enterprise is very well employed, is grieved that he cannot fully satisfy His Majesty's request. When you ask for gold, the Pope shuts down, right?
That's right.
Inasmuch as he has found the pontifical treasury much exhausted, and the revenues of the Apostolic See in great part spent and pledged, hence, being unable to offer the sum which he would readily contribute, and being ready to go beyond every subsidy which has been granted by his predecessors for any enterprise hitherto undertaken on behalf of the Catholic religion, he offers His Majesty, as soon as the expedition has set sail for the enterprise against England, to give 200,000 crowns, and he will give 100,000 more the moment the army has landed on the island, and yet further 100,000 more at the end of 6 months, and in like manner after another 6 months 100,000 more. And if the war lasts longer, His Holiness will continue to give each year 200,000 crowns, meaning by the continuance of the war that the person who ought to have the kingdom is not yet put in possession of it. Here we go into a little footnote that says, when the Armada had failed and the shattered hulks returned to Spain, the Pope refused to pay a single ducat. He could not be expected, he said, to pay such a sum for an Armada that had accomplished nothing and was now at the bottom of the sea. This aid, the author continues to say, will be given either in ready money or partly in ready money and partly in paid Italian soldiers, whom His Holiness would be glad to employ in this enterprise, as has been the custom in every other similar one of importance. Besides this, he will not fail to excite and animate all the Italian princes to so glorious and holy an enterprise, which, if it turns out prosperously, as with God's favor is hoped, His Holiness's intention is that the Apostolic See should recover and be effectually replaced in possessions of the revenues, rights, jurisdictions, and actions which it formerly had in that kingdom before Henry VIII apostatized from the faith. Unquote. It may be asked, why have the good fathers of Brompton Oratory been so frank and honest as to publish such damaging evidence? Because Freud already had published the evidence in 1870 with his volume 12, and the minds of scholars were familiar with it all. There was nothing new under the sun for them. They wished their old tales in the same work to carry weight, so they told these damaging truths against their own church, so that the whole work might stand together as a true record of the past. This practice has always been a favorite literary trick of the Romish scholars. In future years, the records of the English Catholics will be kept alive, but the Spanish state documents will be forgotten. To demonstrate afresh how the Jesuits today try to falsify history concerning the Armada, Here is their comment on the author's book, The Defeat of the Spanish Armada in 1913 AD. The following review was published in Roman Catholic Book Notes, October 1913. This little paper is a sort of puff for Roman Catholic quote-unquote Truth Society publications. It is edited by an ex-member of the Church of England who claims to have found the truth in the Church of Rome. Who has claimed to found the truth in the Church of Rome? With what can you compare that, brother Bret? How can you find a grain of truth in the Roman Catholic Church compared to other things that are very difficult to find? I think you easier find a square egg by a hen, laid by a hen, than you find the truth in the Roman Catholic Church.
Well, maybe you find equivocation of truth. I don't know. Yeah, that's a good question, Jörg.
But I think that this is a good moment to take a break for our next reading and to leave our readers and listeners a little bit on the verge of interest, that they want to see how the story ends, and therefore we can return next time to this wonderful book reading from Albert Close, The Divine History of the Divine Program of the World's History, where we continue next time in the probably 36th or something reading in that regard. I mean, it doesn't matter how many readings there are, but we are way above the 30s already.
Right.
And we are a little bit over half of the book, so a lot of stuff is still to come. I hope that you enjoyed our broadcast today. I enjoyed myself very much, and I think that was to hear. And I think also Bret had his pleasure in this broadcast today.
Absolutely.
And I appreciate it because it is 8 o'clock over my time here in the afternoon. Therefore, it is noontime in America. And of course, Brother Bret can be very much more contributive to this work than to many others, which happened just in the morning after he got up. So I appreciate very much his take in and his contributions that he had today in our broadcast. For my part, I'm going to close this down, and of course I leave the closing remarks to Brother Bret in Minnesota. Please, brother.
Thanks, Jörg. Yeah, how the Jesuits falsify history today. We got that on the top of the page there, and I just think of, and that's it's interesting to know who your enemy is, and really the enemy has been such a close friend, Jörg, in America, and I think in Europe too. I think we go hand in hand with this, unless we somehow bump into these very interesting arguments in the Bible, and you put one and one together and they don't quite make two in this modern day and age when you're looking at the history especially. So this falsification is pretty glaringly obvious something is wrong. And but the problem here is how do you define let's just try and define ultramontanism. There's all kinds of ways to define that. And I was just using that quote from Encyclopedia Britannica 1911 on the end of the video that I just produced for Code Word Babylon number 35 right now. I was just like, wow.
Almost the same number as this.
Ultramontanism is like the term you can throw in the gears of any Roman Catholic mind and it will just freeze them up. They'll just be like, what are you talking about? Well, at least that's my experience with it, Jörg. I don't know about you, but I know a few Roman Catholics and even ones I don't know, I meet on the street. I throw that at them every once in a while.
The point is, Bret, that this term ultramontanism is a term from the end of the 19th and beginning of the 20th century. it is not a term that is very much used anymore today. Therefore,
Yes.
it is out of the minds of many people.
Out of context.
Yeah, out of context to even lay the context. What is he talking about? You know?
Right. Right. It's a
the people-
historical reality.
Yeah, the people do not understand with the First Vatican Council in 1870 and the
No,
declaration
that's
of the
true.
Pope's infallibility.
Yeah.
I mean, the Pope has for the Roman Catholic Church always been infallible. That's not
That's
the point.
right.
But in
Right.
1870, they put it in writing in Roman Catholic canon law.
Yes.
And most Roman Catholics do not understand what that implies. That implies, if he is infallible, that he is the leader of all the people, like Boniface
Sure.
VIII said in his Bulla Unam Sanctam in 1302, when he said that it is absolutely
Imperative.
imperative, for every human creature to be subject to the Roman Pontiff for salvation.
That's
So
right.
I am with this bull from Pope Boniface VIII and with the declaration of infallibility of the Pope in 1870 as a Roman Catholic completely bound to the superior authority of the Pope. And another name for the superior authority is Ultramontanism.
Yep, that's a big one. Really, really big one, Jörg. And I think that wraps it up for our session today then, brother.
Yeah, wonderful. I enjoyed myself. So thank you
So
very
did
much
I.
for watching
You're welcome,
and listening. And until next time. And
Thanks for the comments too, everybody. And we really appreciate any kind of support at all because, we don't get a whole lot of support, but anything we do get, we sure do appreciate. And we'd love it if you'd share the videos and the discussions with your friends and your family, if you can. If you can.
Yes, we can.
I don't have too many friends that would enjoy this topic, but there are a few. So I'm very, very thankful for them. Very, very thankful for them. And as always, we wish God's blessing for you to encourage your family and your friends to read your Bible daily and become a good Berean. Become a good Berean. Check everything on the Word of God. And we'll catch up with you next time. God bless. Bye-bye for now.
From whence come wars and fightings among you? Come they not hence even of your lusts that war in your members? Ye lust and have not, ye kill and desire to have and cannot obtain. Ye fight and war, yet ye have not because ye ask not. Ye ask and receive not because ye ask amiss, that ye may consume it upon your lusts. Ye adulterers and adulteresses, know ye not that the friendship of the world is enmity with God? Whosoever therefore will be a friend of the world is the enemy of God. Do ye think that the Scripture saith in vain, the Spirit that dwelleth in us lusteth to envy? But he giveth more grace. Wherefore he saith, God resisteth the proud, but giveth grace unto the humble. Submit yourselves therefore to God. Resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Draw nigh to God, and he will draw nigh to you. Cleanse your hands, ye sinners, and purify your hearts, ye double-minded. Be afflicted, and mourn, and weep. Let your laughter be turned to mourning, and your joy to heaviness. Humble yourselves in the sight of the Lord, and he shall lift you up. Speak not evil one of another, brethren. He that speaketh evil of his brother, and judgeth his brother, speaketh evil of the law, and judgeth the law. But if thou judge the law, thou art not a doer of the law, but a judge. There is one lawgiver who is able to save and to destroy. Who art thou that judgest another? Go to now, ye that say today or tomorrow, we will go into such a city, and continue there a year, and buy and sell and get gain. Whereas ye know not what shall be on the morrow. For what is your life? It is even a vapor, that appeareth for a little time, and then vanisheth away. For that ye ought to say, if the Lord will, we shall live and do this or that. But now ye rejoice in your boastings. All such rejoicing is evil. Therefore, to him that knoweth to do good and doeth it not, to him it is sin. Go to now, ye rich men, weep and howl for your miseries that shall come upon you. Your riches are corrupted, and your garments are moth-eaten. Your gold and silver is cankered, and the rust of them shall be a witness against you, and shall eat your flesh as it were fire.